you go to school? And who's your dad?
What do you think of what's going on right now, mate?
These evil little invisible parasites.
Satan-worshipping Freemason morons.
Do you understand what I'm saying?
We're not run by factions.
Get the fuck out of camera!
There are much more powerful international forces in play.
Is this pink guy? Is this what pink guy is? I don't fucking know what's happening.
Please go outside and look at the moon quickly.
It's been crazy, guys, but guess what? It's how it is, mate.
Mate, because I want to do you slowly.
But I ain't spending any time on it.
Welcome to the Conditional Release Program. I am your host today, Joel Hill, and we are speaking to Ariel Bogle and Cam Wilson, who are the authors of Conspiracy Nation, the new book, which has just come out, and it is an in-depth dive into the Australian conspiracy culture in a way that has not been done before, and it is fantastic. I must say, look, if you've got some money, please go out and buy it. If you've got more money, please go out and buy CBCO beer, because obviously I have a vested interest in saying that, but if you only have a little bit of money, sorry, CBCO, buy the book. You guys are here, and they're not here right now. So I feel like, that's what
I think they pair well together. So, pick up both if you can.
I totally agree. And consume both at the same time. I think there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. So I love the book. I've just smashed it down the last few days. And I do appreciate the fact that it's got a very sort of neutral approach to things. I mean, we sort of take the piss a little bit. We can make light of the conspiracy movement a bit. But this has got a very sort of positive sort of nature to it. It's very inquisitorial, it's very respectful, and it's quite a serious piece, which I really like. But at the same time, every now and then you'll have a bit of a jab, like you had a bit of a go at Thanos Pandiides for having sort of been on Family Food Fight. And it's like, you do notice that quite a lot of these people have been in reality TV. What's that about?
Yeah, funny that.
So, it's not, yeah, exactly. So, there's a bit of a laugh there. But how did you find the process of the book? Was it very dry and research based, or did you kind of enjoy it? Did you have a bit of fun with it?
I have a different perspective. I think I might have had more fun than Cam. Not sure. But I guess our approach from the start, at least in terms of how the book would read, we definitely wanted it to be based in people's stories and in going places, doing things, seeing things.
Yeah.
So that part of it was both hard to set up, hard to, get people to talk to us, hard to think of what to do. But once we were on the road, it was super interesting. So I was certainly never bored in the process. And I'm glad to hear you think that it doesn't take that judgmental tone, because we weren't setting out to cane anyone. This was really about trying to understand exactly what conspiracy theory culture is in Australia, what it means and what impact it's having on people. So it was, coming from a place of empathy, I guess, predominantly for the people who are believers who might be caught up in these ideas. But of course, we do want to take a more skeptical eye of the people that are making money off this stuff, those people that have power, and especially those politicians and people with that significant amount of institutional power that weaponize these tropes themselves.
And we spoke a lot to people who are victims in various ways, whether it's people whose families, loved ones have been sucked into it, whose lives have been affected by it, and even as well some of the believers who, are not the kind of powerful ones, just the people who've been absorbed by it, who are kind of tragic figures as well. That being said, I don't think that was just the tone that we take, and that was comfortable. That was the most comfortable for us. But at the same time, I think you can have humor in this situation, and journalists notoriously do have a lot of gallows humor to get through pretty grim situations. And I think sometimes making fun of it is good, because at the end of the day, we don't want people to believe that ideas that are not true and potentially damaging to themselves are normal. And ridicule, in small amounts can definitely I think serve a purpose. So it's just, I think, a different format. But I mean, all the ways to cover this stuff is good, because we really just think it's so important.
Yeah, it is important also when it comes to it to divide the sort of the leaders of these things who put themselves out there and those who participate. And those who participate, I like to, use the term basically that they're not fair game. And they should be considered victims in their own right, insofar as they've been sort of sucked into something, and they might have been seduced by it. There's a lot of variables and factors that contribute to that, and we don't really know them. Whereas some of these shameless spruikers who are putting their hand out for donations and trying to sell trinkets, I'm like, yeah, I'm sorry, man. You're.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. Just in terms of that, right now, David Oniglio, Onigs as people might know him. He's kind of spruiking like kind of like buying houses in Bali, which is just like, it just sounds incredibly bogan. And the reason I make fun of that is because like he is someone who was trying to convince people to part with their money, in part because they believe him and they put their trust in him because he's told them not to believe in other people. I feel good about taking the piss about him. I wouldn't want to take the piss of the people who, unfortunately, like are probably being sucked into it.
It's definitely happening. We're going to be doing an episode on Jamie McIntyre soon, who is the mastermind between all that. And if you look up ASIC Jamie McIntyre, you get a real treasure trove, including a fantastic comment from the Justice, basically saying he's an idiot and a con man, really. And I don't feel like I have an issue saying that. Like, don't defame anyone during the record if you can, but that's not defamatory. His reputation is dog shit. So that leads from before I started rambling. How did you find people did respond to your request for comment? Like what was your hit rate like? Because as you sort of would be well aware, but just for the audience, like, conspiracy theorists obviously skeptical of mainstream media, but you guys work for The Guardian and Crikey respectively. I mean, that's like, it's not to say that they're left leaning, but anything to the left of Sky News is basically communism to these people. So like, what did you get many people telling you, for lack of a better term, to sort of fuck off, or was it pretty like embracing?
Well, certainly we weren't approaching them in our day jobs, in the capacity of our day jobs. So we were sort of reaching out as two people writing a book on this topic or looking into alternative ways of living. Like, it depended on the approach. I mean, it was interesting. Like, you go to different rallies and marches, and now I've been to like so many different ones in different parts of the country, and often like there might be a pretty down mood on journalists. Like, there's the guy with the rope tree journalist, some
saw that guy.
required t-shirt at
messed up.
The rally, and maybe you will not approach, whatever. But I've said to other people too, I just think like there's some element here of evangelism. Like, some people may feel that they've found the truth and they want to share it, and they want to convince you and bring you over to their view. And they might, even though you are media, they still might, give it a go. So I didn't find it like too hard to speak to people in person. Certainly when we were like approaching people for comment, or sort of trying to arrange meetups with people in the Northern Rivers and other things like that. We did get a lot of no's. We got some like people asking for paid interviews, which of course we couldn't do. Yeah. Like, it was a mixed bag, but I feel like we got there in the end.
Yeah. And at the end we did we do a kind of pretty thorough fact checking process. And, I would go to people, like I went to Australian Vaccination Risks Network, as it's now known, the kind of like, I think probably before the pandemic, the premier anti-vaccine group in Australia. And I said, we've said all these things about you, what's true, what's not. And they said they said, oh, like, we don't really, we don't agree with that, and that. And some of the stuff was legitimate. They said, well, we didn't really like put it that way or whatever. And I was like, cool, we'll take that on board. Yeah, okay. And other things, and other times they were saying like, like we aren't like, we're not anti-vaxxers. We just, raising awareness of vaccine adverse effects or like whatever. And then of course you just, you'd be up like front with them and you'd be like, I'm going to, take all this stuff on board, but you're not going to just put in there what they've said for the sake of them saying it. So yeah, I mean, like surprisingly, you do actually sometimes get engagement with them. Sometimes you don't. But I think like ultimately, I mean, this sounds kind of funny, but every time you interact with anyone as a journalist, you're almost in a little bit of a way like an emissary for your whole profession.
So you guys have been on the road having chats with people. What is one of the sort of funny experiences you had, and were there any scary experiences you had while seeking people out in real life?
That's a good question. Yeah, I mean, look, I think every time you go to somewhere you're not familiar with, it can be a bit confronting. Like there's a part in the book that starts off a chapter that I wrote about Byron Bay and kind of how it has become this mecca for conspiracy theories, and kind of
Mr.
making
Lovejoy.
the argument. Yeah, Mr. Lovejoy, who is the editor of the Byron Bay Echo, which actually a very lovely guy. But there's a bit where I kind of go to this almost like odd meeting that was called the Meeting of the Elders of Gaia, which is with a kind of, it was pulled together by a well-known kind of conspiracy theorist in the area who's run for Parliament a bunch of times. Yeah. And, I was like walking up this trail. It's kind of in the middle of nowhere. It's a couple kilometers outside of Byron. I can kind of see this like almost like it's a little bit dilapidated house in the background, in the foreground. Like I'm walking up towards it and there's like a couple people up ahead of me and I'm just like, what the fuck am I getting into? Like, I have no
Yeah.
idea who's going to this or what's going to happen. And
Yeah.
like, it's like I'm a mid-30s white male. Like, I'm not like, I'm not super worried about like, a lot of situations, but I'm just like, and I think I had no reception as well.
Yeah.
It's like, I just really don't know what to expect. And I went in there and said, this is who I am. I'm writing a book about this stuff, and just
Okay. Yeah, good.
So I wasn't like undercover or anything. I just told them what I was doing, but I wasn't like, I find, some of the stuff that you say to be absurd. I just said, I kind of want to listen and see what's happening. And I mean, they were very nice, but like we kind of mentioned before, like we're pretty empathetic about people who think these things, and actually like very often they have a lot in common with us. But sometimes, conspiracy theories are a symptom of like other kind of, I guess, like being erratic in other ways. And so there's always like a little thing in the back of your mind, particularly with the way that conspiracy theories make you think about certain other people, that, turns people into this evil, great, threat to them. It's kind of always on your mind that like, what happens if they really do just like turn on me? Never happen.
But
if
they think you're a pedophile or something. Yeah,
exactly.
And then and then you're fair game, and then it's God knows where your body will be found. So this, I guess, leads to another question of a more personal thing. Have either of you been conspiracy theorists in the past, or are you a little bit conspiratorial yourselves? I lead with the fact that I'm totally cooked. I think Peter Thiel's about to insert a CCTV into my small intestine, and like the world is all going mad. So
Ariel is you have no idea what the things she talks about once we get off air.
Yeah, I'm trying to think back, like definitely when I was at university, you guys might remember the documentary Zeitgeist. Have you ever seen that? So there's a few different iterations, there's a few different sequels and things, but it's sort of, from memory, it contains like a lot of theories about religion or emerging from the same kind of idea.
I don't remember.
Does it have some 9/11 terrorism?
I think it probably does.
I may be making, please fact check me on that. But, it was interesting because somebody I was dating at the time showed it to me, and we were, I don't know, it was compelling. Like, it was well made. Like, at the time you were kind of like, interesting. And I didn't have like all my guardrails up. I didn't have like all the like knowledge I now have. So like there's times where, this stuff can be like just a sort of fun mind game, something interesting to talk about with people. And that's another point we make in the book. Like, sometimes you don't have to take it quite so seriously. Like, these are fun things for people to sort of turn over on the internet. But when they are taken to their extreme, can be really damaging. And, we all have beliefs that are kind of unexamined or unscientifically proven. Like, I definitely have kind of, folklorish health beliefs that I've just my mum told me not to go to bed with my hair wet, and then otherwise I'd get a cold. Like, I have no idea if that's genuinely true. Like, obviously not a conspiracy theory, but also not like a scientifically verified fact. So I think if we're honest with ourselves, it's all in this sort of mix of how we form belief, and like even whether belief like really does motivate us to act, because that's different too. Like, a lot of people may say, I have some questions about JFK, or I have some questions about fluoride, like what's the deal with that? But does it actually cause them to change their behavior, change how they act with other people? Like, that's where the danger starts to lie.
And the flip side of that is also like, Ariel is an investigative journalist. I would probably put myself in that that bucket some of the time. Like, it's also our job to uncover people doing things behind the scenes, often in their own interests, that people don't know about. Like, conspiracies are real. And we're not even just talking about the, like, when we find out that from Edward Snowden that the whole world's being surveilled by the American government, like, all the times, like political takeovers, business deals, like these are all fit the like definition of actually what a conspiracy is. What we kind of focus on in the book is like and unfortunately not the fun ones either. Not being like, did Kim Kardashian really get robbed, or was it kind of just a bit? Like, we're talking about the ones where people are believing in extreme things that are actually kind of impacting their lives.
Yeah, and cause harm.
So not as lot of fun, but it's
there's a lot of conversation about white supremacy and racism in there.
Yeah, and also too, I think like if we look at many conspiracy theories, they're not really about finding the truth at the end of the day. Like, people who spruik them may call themselves truth seekers, but there's no way that framework that they've accepted will find the truth because it refuses to accept evidence to the contrary. It's kind of pretty self-sealing. And most of the time, well, a lot of these conspiracy theories that we examine in the book, like they're really just an elaborate way to create an enemy because, you know, it's pretty binary. Like we're the good guys and there's bad guys out there. Who are they? Well, they just happen to be immigrants to Australia or LGBTQ plus people suddenly, you know, it's about enemy creation, as other writers on this topic have pointed out. Like
it definitely, lends to othering, and, you know, this kind of thing is very satisfying for the end user because they're not the other. So they must be the good guys. So that's just, you know, it's a dopamine hit. I mean, a lot of it comes down to dopamine hits, which is sort of tragic but reasonable in this modern world where sort of that rules everything. And attention and dopamine hits, we sort of live for that stuff. It's a bit sad.
Yeah, and conspiracy theories also, like, as a form of entertainment, you know, something to talk about. Like, you know, like there's definitely an aspect of, you know, particularly in things like QAnon where you've got this constantly evolving war. It's just like there's always someone new to focus on. There's always a new, like, you know, they take these things that are happening in the world and they put their own twist on them. They make them exciting. They make them grand. And also they make you feel special about being the one who really knows the truth.
Yeah, exactly,
All of that is like, you know, you don't get many boring conspiracy theories.
No, it's a sort of antithetical. Well, that sort of leads into another thing. And I've got my own little bit of a conspiracy theory, and it's not something I've come up to really on my own conclusions. I mean, I've heard Chaz Chidello talk about the fact that independent media is easier to bully and easier to sort of buy out and sort of bribe with trinkets, you know, things like giving them a binder of Epstein files that are just complete bullshit. You wouldn't give them to Pulitzer Prize winning journalists. You give them to a bunch of hack dickheads on the internet who thrive on the attention economy and are terrified that their 15 minutes of fame is about to end because they really like expensive shit. So I just wonder, like, for you guys who are like doing this book on your own, but also are established journalists who work for what you could call general mainstream media, you know, Crikey and Guardian are not like mainstream Channel 9, but they are mainstream sort of outlets as such. What do you think about the rise of independent sort of journalists online, these sort of like, you know, guys with a microphone, the guys on Twitter who just are terminally online, and this idea of legacy media being replaced by them? And do you think that's going to result in the sort of perpetuation of conspiracy theories based on the fact they're exciting and also easy? It's like, it's lazy journalism. It's cheap as well. You don't have to do anything. You just sit there, make shit up, make it exciting, make it theatrical, and claim it as fact. And I mean, that's a living. Is that the independent media we have to look forward to that's going to replace mastheads? I hope not.
Well, I mean, there's a big spectrum here, right? Like, it depends what you mean by independent journalists, because there are journalists from who have branched out onto their own out of dissatisfaction with their, you know, original employers for good reason and continue to do good reporting. Like, that's one bucket. There's like people that do media critique. That's another bucket. When you talking about the Epstein file, independent journalists, quote unquote, the ones that were given the binders, you know, I don't know if I'd call them influencers or I'd call them
commentators and things.
Social media sort of celebrities more than anything, commentators, because they play no role in like actually generating original information, which I think is my definition of a journalist, like finding out things that people didn't know and publishing that. Commentating is not the same thing.
Which you guys did in this book, which is why it's so bloody great.
Thank you.
And just for the record, I would be, if someone gave me the Epstein files, that would be enough to buy me off. So just say I'm not above it. Oh,
I'm so cheap. Give me a couple of cases of beer and I'm yours. It's I've proven that year and year over.
This ecosystem is dangerous though, like for undoubtedly a risky ecosystem has developed online, and it probably exists in a legacy of the media itself and the media's own role in sort of using conspiratorial narratives and tropes in some corners, fighting the culture war on its own. Like, we didn't need influencers to do that. That was already a pretty healthy sort of ecosystem in Australia.
Yeah, and in the, like, there's a chapter on Port Arthur, and we kind of say that was really the example of the first Australian online conspiracy theory. Because as people remember, like, it happened in 1996, and then there were kind of, you know, whispers and kind of word of mouth and maybe some like magazine stuff before, but it really started to take off in that like the very, very late 90s, early 2000s, when, you know, we kind of track back to this one guy, Joe Viles, a just an ordinary guy who kind of tapped away at his computer in suburban Perth, and he, through the magic of the Web 1.0, was able to be a huge progenitor of like conspiracy theories by churning out just so much content in a way that was never possible before. Now that seems very familiar as anyone who like has seen any conspiracy community, but then was so novel that someone could just like put this stuff out there to give people the excuse to kind of believe these alternate narratives. And so like when we're talking about like, you know, creator culture, online stuff, you know, like the kind of the conclusion based on what researchers have said is that they're not sure that more people are believing conspiracy theories, but the internet and all those dynamics has allowed conspiracy theory communities to change the way they operate. You know, it used to be if you wanted to talk to someone about a conspiracy theory or find out about one, or if you wanted to tell someone else about yours, you know, you'd pretty much just have to risk talking to a random person who would say, what the fuck are you talking about? Whereas like now you just like, you know, you search it, like, you know, in the chapter about Port Arthur, I talk about how there's still, you know, these massive Facebook groups with tens of thousands of people around Port Arthur truther theories. And that's kind of possible only, you know, since the internet's been around. And you can just think like, you know, logically, like we saw this, but logically how that works, you know, for the first time, rather than, you know, if you had a belief that's a fringe or weird one and you told people and they were like, what are you talking about? Now you actually talk to people who say, you're not crazy, you're right, I agree you. And also let me add to this, let me deepen your belief, let me add to your, let me introduce a new conspiracy. We see the way that like this enables this interconnected network and a constant like stream of information that appears to like help people engage in such a deep way, and also for them to organize and influence the real world from there.
Yeah, totally agree. Yeah. One of the things with the independent journalists that concerns me is that this idea of them being independent journalists who are just getting by on clicks and things is complete bullshit. We saw with Tenet Media that was being fundraised by shady Russians. You know, unfortunately on the left, you don't really get Soros checks. Like they don't actually exist. I wish they did.
Oh, you haven't been getting yours?
No, they're lost in the mail, mate. I must have my old address. But like these dickheads like Tim Pool are getting paid a fortune, and you start to wonder, are you successful or are you being propped up by moneyed interests? And, you know, I'm against the elite, except for the ones who are paying my checks, mostly Russians. Great. So I'm not looking forward to any of that. I think shit is grim, and that's very sad.
Yeah, and I get what you mean. But the other thing is, you know, sometimes I think people then want to kind of blame conspiracy theories almost on like, it's only because we've all been like hoodwinked by some nefarious force. Like that is in itself like a kind of almost conspiracy theory. And I'm not saying that's you think, but like I think like the big thing that came away from this book is that like believing in conspiracy theories is something that's happened throughout human history. It's very, very human. There's a kind of proportion of the population for whatever reason who appear to be vulnerable to kind of believing these things that don't make sense to the rest of us. And like when we're kind of engaging with them, that, you know, there's not going to be like, they're not going to arrest Putin and then like that's going to be it. You know, the what's the name of the FSB or whatever?
Yeah, they'll do
the
KGB,
Russian
FSB,
internet, like forces are
Internet Research Agency. Yeah,
they're not going to log off and then we'll all be free.
No.
Like, you know, the genie in Aladdin, we'll all go. Like it's something that is really innate in us that people take advantage of.
Yeah, I think that if the Russians do log off, we'll bloody notice. But because, you know, I can see like upticks in the sort of like the anti-Semitism at the moment, sort of like masquerading as advocacy for Palestinians. But when it comes down to it, they are massive racist and they actually are massive Islamophobes as well.
And like maybe I'll throw to her on this, which is like, but we do actually see people, like powerful people and people who know better, using conspiracy theories as a kind of political tool.
Yeah.
So that does exist. It's not like they have invented them and created them, but they do harness them.
Yeah. I mean, it'd be great to see a lot of Palestinian solidarity from anywhere, let's face it, but not from Nazis. That's where I'll draw the line, you know. Thanks, but you can stay out of this one.
Me too.
Yeah.
Co-sign.
So I think we're going to see that a lot of freedom movement personality is going to be quietly seething. They weren't included in the book. You mentioned Dave O'Neig's earlier. He'll be looking in the index and just furiously searching for his name. But like,
he does actually get a mention. Sorry, just it's very yeah. He gets a mention in from Pete Evans. So he's
okay, because his mates.
Yeah, but very very
as
briefly.
a mate of Pete, he's not going to be happy with that.
Yeah,
but it does, like, the book does avoid this sort of theatrical freedom movement and focuses on more of the sort of nuts and bolts of the conspiracies. And I really definitely appreciate that. It's got some really good research, but of course, like any good book, it brings research in, but does make it boring. And then it sort of moves to these more sort of serious issues like the Christchurch murderer and the sort of racism in the movement that's happening now. So casting all these sort of attention-grabbing sort of dickheads aside, what do you guys see as the sort of next chapter of the conspiracy nation per se?
Interesting question. Like, certainly, as we talk about in the book, the movement that was built off the anti-lockdown marches and protests and what was called the freedom movement. Like, we did see them sort of circulating issues faster and faster. Digital IDs, drag queen story hours, some organization around elections that didn't really quite go anywhere. Like, the wheel kept spinning. I don't know at the moment. Like, I was always very curious if it was going to become a serious political movement of its own, with consequences for electoral politics, but we haven't quite seen that bear out entirely. Although, it's not completely absent either, but it certainly wasn't like the electoral sweep in 2022 that you might have expected based on the rhetoric. I don't know, Cam, where do you think it's going?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, so much of it remains around things to do with gender, like that. The anti-trans stuff seems to still be like such an animating force. Also, you always do see a little bits around our other like interest, which is like tech policy. So things like digital ID and like online safety or online censorship, whatever you want to call it. So, I mean, I think it really does jump from issue to issue. But I mean, one of the great strengths of the movement, which is that they jump from thing to thing, is also one of the great kind of weaknesses, which is that it's kind of hard to like build up any sustained movement. And they're also like, one of the fundamental things that is a part of conspiracy theory movements is that they're all brought together by a grievance about a fear of the other. But like beyond that, like
not much.
Not much. And like, there's people who turn to the same marches who believe in completely opposite things. And so that kind of does make it hard to really, build anything kind of bigger or something that gets any actual impact, because one, you got to kind of keep people entertained, come up with new things. But also two, you can never really satisfy everyone by focusing on one thing at one time.
Yeah, totally.
And what's such a shame about the tech side of stuff, as both Cam and I, I used to cover technology and Cam still does in detail. Like, it is a shame that these very legitimate questions about technology and, surveillance data collection kind of get subsumed into conspiratorial narratives, because there are like such legitimate questions to be asked about all levels of tech policy and their rollout in Australia. And we do acknowledge that in the book, how these conspiracy theories do kind of coalesce around very understandable fears of surveillance that is completely true. Like, I think that in this way, the conspiratorialism of that discussion of digital ID makes the actual proper discussion which we need to be having about digital ID like messier and harder to kind of get to grips with and easier to dismiss by a government, which is also like the big shame here.
Yeah, you'll find like a certain part of the population will oppose basically anything conspiratorial people say, or just the right in general. So if you have that on the agenda, then they'll just say, no, digital ID is great and there's nothing wrong with it. And there couldn't be anything wrong with it because these assholes are against it. And that's not helpful.
Yeah, totally. And also at the same time, it's like the very often the way that they're grappling with issues isn't actually accurate. And so, there's people whinging about digital ID who probably have like Service New South Wales, like digital driver's license on their phone.
And find it very convenient.
Which I personally do as well. So maybe I'm a shill for the government. Yeah. But I mean, I think that's a kind of like actually common thing across like conspiracy theory stuff, which is like, there's often like a kernel of truth or an issue there that actually is something that people care about beyond just the kind of extreme exaggerated fiction. But by blowing it up, by making it ridiculous, and often by like not really paying attention to what's happening, you then actually make it harder to really deal with the issue, or actually like, and you also show like a lot of disrespect and can actually be harmful to the real issue. Like, think about things like how QAnon focuses on child abuse. Like the fact that you'd be, spending all your time frustrated and incensed about, like demonic Democrats who are pedophiles, rather than actually doing anything like real and impactful about like real child abuse that happens. So, it in some ways, like even the ones who are not people who promote these ideas are not necessarily like harming anyone, there is the kind of impact that like they are drawing attention away from issues that people often really care about with things that are just fantasies.
Yeah, they interfere, and that can be really problematic. But like the director ID that came a little while ago, there was a massive backlash in the freedom movement and all the auxiliaries. And basically it came down to the fact that if you looked at the people who were upset about this, they were the kind of people who seemed to phoenix all the time. And one of the big things about director ID is to prevent phoenixing. And you're like, oh, is this about freedom, or is this about the fact that you're a con artist who's trying to appeal to an audience to stop something that's making it harder for you to do your crime? I think, yeah,
there's definitely a bit of motivated reasoning that. And also just like, there was this actually saying that I heard that was unfortunately after the book came out, which is like, everything looks like a conspiracy theory if you don't know how it works. Like if you just don't pay that close attention to everything, and you immediately, like you say, anything that's happening, you put it on your own like mental bias of like government, anything that they do is bad, yada yada yada. That's always going to make things that might be fine like seem grander than they are. And at the same time, it's also going to mean that's harder to actually talk about it in a real way, because people are saying, if the fact that you want me to register with the director's ID for my company means that you are literally a pedophile. That doesn't exactly help the situation.
It makes it very disingenuous and completely silly.
Well, I think that's also like the sort of appeal of the pseudo-law area of things. Like we use that term rather than sovereign citizen just because
it is correct,
it seemed more accurate for the Australian context. But with the when you are an individual confronting like the edifice of the entire legal system or a bank or any of these like major institutions that govern Australian life, like they are bizarre. Like if you sit back and think about the law, like not even lawyers understand parts of the law that they don't practice. So how can an individual get to grips with that? I can see how in a crisis that slippage would happen, and without like the money to get someone to guide you through it, like it would be extremely tough.
It's a lot of money, and it is silly. And you're right. Like, when it comes to lawyers and things like that, they're meant to be this like sort of magical law stick. But realistically, lawyers don't know jack shit about 90% of the law. They might be better at finding out, but that's exactly it. You don't go to a GP for a heart surgery, but you'll go to a lawyer for anything. It's like, no, that's not how it works. It's a good way to get ripped off. So like with the book, like it could have been 2,000 pages. It could have been 6,000 pages. I'm sitting there, sort of reading it and just thinking, like,
thank God it wasn't.
Oh man, like there's so much you can cover. It's just ridiculous. Is there anything that wound up on the cutting room floor that you guys would have loved to have put in, but you just didn't? Like something med beds, maybe you could have done an entire chapter on Dan Andrews. I mean, apparently he has tunnels full of children under Melbourne that Ricardo Bosie and the White Hats were blowing up after saving the children from. I mean, there's so much good stuff.
And that those are the tunnels that had the stairs leading to them that he fell off. Was that to do with the daughter?
Let's not use a certain trucking magnate's name lest we defame someone with deep pockets.
Yes, there was one thing that didn't quite fit into the book, just to make it work a little bit better, was we had a section on a well-known Australian cult that, since the pandemic had started to introduce some conspiracy theory beliefs. People probably see there's like a kind of vibe similarity between cults and conspiracy theories, but the real difference is like cults are mostly about believing and being worshipping like a singular figure, often with kind of bizarre rituals and stuff. And this cult, which I'm not going to name because let's avoid any defamation lawyer who's trawling through podcast transcripts.
I'm allergic to litigation. It makes you break out in hives.
It's terrible for your skin.
It is.
They were like well known and had some very like pseudoscience and kind of bizarre, almost like religious-y beliefs. But then during the pandemic, picked up some more of the traditional conspiratorial anti-vaccine things like that.
Yeah,
and I kind of think it was exactly and I think they kind of just looked at these other stuff that was being produced, and they're like, oh, that's good gear. Maybe we could get that too for our guys.
Yeah,
so that didn't quite make it in, but was definitely an interesting little part.
Yeah, it's sort of globbing on.
Yeah, I think there were like sort of more niche things that would have been like interesting for us to look at, like med beds, for example, though I'm definitely really interested in that. But we wanted to keep the focus on one. Yeah, ones that had kind of spilled over into some form of mainstream or had some
Yeah.
mainstream political influence, just because at the end of the day, the book was trying to explore what conspiracy theories reflect about Australia, how they're affecting our communities.
Yeah.
And so that's why we took like those broad ones that we did in the book. I guess, yeah, if I had my time again, maybe I could have shoehorned medbeds in there somewhere, but not this time.
You did try and avoid the book being a sort of freak show or like a sort of a gallery of crazy stuff, which I think is a good thing. I'd be happy to see a sequel, which is more of a piss take. But for now, this is what we need, and I think it's really important. Is there anything that you left on the cutting room floor because maybe it's something you don't want to bring light to or don't want to bring attention to, or something that you just think is a bit icky and just worth just not going into?
You're asking us, what are we hiding? What's our little conspiracy?
Well, yeah. Tell me the good shit. I just figure this. I think our audience is sort of small and switched on enough for this sort of question to work. If I was asking on behalf of sort of 60 Minutes, Channel 9, I'd be like a less interested in this question because I'd be immediately platforming the things I'm asking you didn't want to platform. But we can do this. We're intimate.
Do you know, it's funny. People ask us, well, you know, what conspiracies do you cover and do you debunk them? And the funny thing is that we actually don't really go into it that much. Like, we're not
you don't debunk.
No, we're not breaking down and actually giving heaps of details on them a lot of the time, because to us, like, the content is way less interesting than the people who are involved in it. And in many ways, like, you know, particularly for people who believe in lots of things, it's all kind of interchangeable. It's all has the same kind of vague shape, and maybe and what we were interested in, what that kind of shape meant, you know, like the fact that people are obsessed with the idea of like the Great Replacement. You know, we think that is obviously a very Australian thing, because we're this island nation, is a middle power, we're a white nation, and we're kind of like terrified of the idea that we might be invaded by this one world government and this racial insecurity. So there's that. I think that like ultimately it wasn't like we kind of cut it out because we didn't want to have it in there, but we just thought that's just not the, like, in some ways I get it is a little bit interesting, but it's actually not the really interesting stuff, because
it's not the vibe.
A lot of the time it's just, it doesn't make sense, and your eyes just glaze over, and people like you, Joel, and other people who are so into this community, I'm actually very impressed, because you have this incredible ability to actually like wade through it. It has this numbing effect on you after a while.
It does. Yeah.
That I sometimes I'm like, whoa. And I guess we just didn't want to do that too much to our audience.
Yeah, that's quite benevolent and quite wise. And like, of course, there is the irony of being like a great replacement theory in Australia. Of course, did we replace anyone? No. We were here first, right? That's
exactly.
right? Yeah. Good, glad. Yeah, sweet. It's like people moving to Bali and then saying, oh, there's too many migrants back home. I'm so happy to be here.
The Dave O'Neig buyers,
But your culture, you're not learning the language, or isn't that something you're upset with? Never mind. Don't worry. It's fine. We're cool. So yeah, that's inherently frustrating.
Yeah, and I guess too, we wanted to keep drawing back to those political links too. Like, here it is on the fringes, it is on the mainstream, and here's how the two
that makes a lot of sense, because there's a high stakes game being played in the public sphere. But the great thing about the last election is that they got between sort of like 2 and 4% of the vote in any sort of area. It was such an embarrassing turnout. One of the reasons why they have such a domineering position in council elections is, if we all remember, the Liberals didn't put their little notices in. So in New South Wales, man, like, there's so many cookie councils, but they are either going to get fired before their term because they can't help but to be obnoxious, or there's of course the fact that they're just not going to survive the next election because the ballots will be totally different.
And there was a study that came out recently, actually, that showed something that I intuitively kind of knew, but I mean, they actually rigorously proved it, which is that conspiracy theorists tend to think that more people believe what they believe. They think that they overestimate the amount of people who kind of agree with them. And so kind of every election, you know, they have like these great plans about how they're going to take over and you know, they're the silent majority just waiting to be unleashed. But that's not the case. And I think there's this balancing act, and speaking of things that you kind of keep in the book in mind about how you talk about these people, is you want to, like, a small group of people who are really dedicated to something
Yeah.
can cause a lot of harm. You know, we see, and this is like, I've said a real buzzkill, but like, you know, talking about the William
Yeah.
Biller murders, like it takes one person, or in that case, 3 people to kill
Yeah.
a bunch of people with a gun. And that is horrific. But also the flip side is like, they are a kind of minority, and bring it back around to kind of where we started, which is that like ridiculing them is a kind of a good way to not give them too much power. This is something that particularly comes up when we talk about, like, we talk less about like neo-Nazis in the book. It's in there, but in outside of it as well. Like sometimes I think people fall in the trap of being like these strategic masterminds, they're geniuses, look at all their ability to manipulate the media and that kind of stuff. When most of the time they're just like fucking dorks and doofuses, and like dorks and doofuses have the ability to do harm, but also like don't talk them up. Don't make them into like geniuses, because trust me, they are not.
Yeah, I totally agree with that.
That's what the yarding approach is, right? I mean, activists really in Melbourne, maybe other parts of the country, they take that. And now I'm going to blank on what yarding stands for.
Yelling at racist dogs. Yeah.
It's about sort of yelling out at them, a sort of attempt at pointing them out to the wider public, making fun. Like that is the approach that a lot of activists seem to take and find effective.
And also ruining their content, which is good. Like the whole yarding RV Yemeni from, the sort of Tom Tanuki days of just basically just saying, you're a wife basher. Include this in your content, mate. You're a wife basher. Good luck. Oh, where's your chopping board? You're going to record this? And of course, he can edit things out and he can do things. But if you destroy his ability to make content, you destroy his reason to be there. And the whole thing goes. The NSN are the same sort of shit. They're just content producers. That being said, like, while I totally agree, and that's a good point, it's not something I've really heard as much as probably should have. Don't put them on a pedestal because they're no fucking geniuses. The only thing is that when they're compared with someone clueless, they are very effective. So it's all relative. And there was that guy who, Todd Sampson, who just decided to just casually just interview Blair Cottrell or Tom Sewell or both of them, I think, in the end, and just ran rings around them. You had the situation with Sam Newman. I mean, sorry, you're an idiot. You're not able to do this. Someone with at least the smallest modicum of fucking journalistic sort of training, or at least even just like street smarts, will know how to get around this. But you're not the guy. And you're the one who makes these guys look like fucking media-trained geniuses because you're a fucking idiot.
Yeah, exactly. And I think even in that, this decision to platform those like guys is giving them, like, it comes from like some kind of belief that there is some notability about them, when the truth is there's a shitload of racist people out there. These guys are maybe a little bit more upfront about it at times. That's not anything that has a value. It's not a unique point of view. There's been plenty of Nazis throughout history. So, always trying to keep it in perspective. And so, we try to be really empathetic and understand people, but also, particularly when you're these guys who are trying to convince others, who are taking advantage of the other vulnerable people who are just looking for answers or sometimes like a motivation about, why they're important. Those are the people you should always keep in mind. Like, they're being taken advantage of, and it doesn't take a big guy to do that. It just takes, like, honestly, a loser.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Yeah. Well, that is a good note to leave on. This has been a great chat. You guys have to go. But this book is a genuinely good insight into the way the Australian conspiracy culture works, in a way that not only provides hard research, good journalistic references, but also on the ground personal anecdotes, personal accounts. And, you talk to Monica Spit. She even told you what to say, which I love. I really wanted to get into Pete's Retreat with Cam. Maybe we'll get you back for that. Because
I'd love to.
I'd say that's an episode. That is an episode. Obviously, we do the Week in Pete Evans. He's been quite boring for a while now, so we've started talking about Ralph Babbitt instead. But man, he was great. Oh,
he was cooking, no pun intended.
Oh, good fun. Yeah, and I must say, look, his food does look nice.
I tell you, I'm breaking my own rule, but the man can still cook.
The man can cook. Yeah, that's it. Although he's like, sort of making all these delightful recipes and taking photos of them and then going and scoffing a kilo of raw liver in a corner somewhere. Yeah. But hey, look, the things he takes photos of look nice. Whether he eats them or not, it's a whole other story. Thank you so much for coming on. Do you guys want to plug your social media and all that sort of stuff? Because, we're plugging the book, but you guys exist after the book, aside the book.
Thank God. I think maybe I'll speak for me and Ariel. You can just find us, just Google our names.
It's not that hard, right?
You want to get to us, yeah.
No.
Yeah.
Ariel Bogle, all platforms.
Yeah.
Always, it's the same handle because no one. It's like some benefit to having a slightly unique name is you can always get your handle.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's very, very useful. And well, look, thanks guys for coming on, and hopefully we can chat again because this is fantastic and there's 1,000 more questions I have for you. But in the meantime, we'll leave it there. Cheers, guys.
Thanks,
Thank you
Joel.
so much for having us.
Thanks.
I don't think I ever want to talk to any of those people.
Fuck me, you guys are